and entrepreneur straight out of New York City, Michael Chernow. What's cracking?
So we look at genetics around whether you're more of a strength or endurance balanced athlete, whether you're going to respond better to high or low intensity activity, and then probably most importantly, what your recovery time is. Kind of what we've referenced already, too many of us have this mentality that more is better. So man, if I got to work out 6 days a week and some weeks 7 days a week, that's not true. I mean, what we know in exercise science now is that the gains really come in the recovery, right? We do the work.
Can you repeat that?
The gains come in the recovery. Yeah, exactly.
Wait, can you say that one more time?
Recovery is key. I don't know how much we can stress that, but I would say the majority of the time when I am advising someone around those genes, that's usually the message. Hey, you need to back off a little bit, treat yourself well. Use things like sauna and cold plunge and breathwork techniques, get good sleep. Dear God, it's crazy how much we neglect sleep in this country. But those are the key components of that.
What up, podcast family? Creatures Have a Podcast, episode 17,944. No. Guys, gals, everyone, I'm very excited you're here. I'm very excited to share a podcast with you today that I think you're going to love. I've got Dr. Jeffrey Graham on the podcast today from Wild Health. He is the lead physician at Wild Health, which is a company that I love, that I've done a deep dive on my DNA with. Yes, you heard that right. I did a deep dive on my DNA with Wild Health, and they produced a report for me based on my DNA that told me who I really am and what I really should be doing and what I really shouldn't be doing when it comes to my health. Dr. Jeffrey is a precision medicine physician. He's done a lot of stuff in his life. He's spent a lot of time in sports medicine. He's traveled the world and studied in a couple of other places overseas. He is a hardcore CrossFit athlete. As you can see when the camera shines on him, he is strong. We just had a conversation about how he's diving deep into his Olympic lifting with a coach. And the thing that I love about that is that you look at someone like Jeffrey and you say, all right, Jeff, you're strong. It's obvious. Like you walk down the street, somebody sees him, they're like, boom, strong guy. And literally one of the first things he said to me was, so I'm working with this coach. And that to me is like, everyone should have a coach. Everyone should have a coach. That could be a coach, that should be a coach for your physical health, your mental health, and what Jeff is here to talk about today, your biological health. Really, I believe in having coaches in as many arenas as I can. Doesn't have to have them all the time, but I always love to have a coach. And so the first thing Jeff said to me today was that he's working with a coach, and I was like, man, I love when people that you would look at and say, oh, that dude is probably coaching everyone, and he is. He's a doctor at a incredible company that focuses on helping people be better, stepping away from traditional Western family doctor medicine and starting to look a little bit deeper under the hood. So anyway, I said enough about this wonderful human being sitting next to me. Jeffrey, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, man.
Honored. Big fan.
I would love to, just before we go into it, because I'm a nerd when it comes to Olympic lifting, and I just, you had mentioned Olympic lifting out there, and I'm sure a number of people that listen to this podcast either do Olympic lifting, know what it is, want to do it, or have done it and never want to do it again.
Yeah.
So what can you just tell us about what are you working on right now?
So that's an interesting question, and one that I actually had to figure out myself over the last year. I've been a CrossFit coach and athlete for, 7 years now. But Olympic lifting is primarily, it's two things: it's the snatch and the clean and jerk, and it's the two lifts that are, as the name infers, that that we compete in the Olympics. They are by far the most technical forms of lifting, as opposed to powerlifting, which of course is your bench press, your squat, and your deadlift. Both of which are, both of these forms of lifting are great for gaining strength. The piece of Olympic lifting that I'm really enamored with is the skill level. I consider the snatch the curveball of all, weightlifting techniques. You have to be incredibly athletic. It is the lift that actually produces more power than any other lift or action, I think, in all of sport, because of that combination of moving mass and speed underneath that mass. So, that's what's really fascinated me with it, and just trying to, so it's not just the strength that you're referencing, the muscle building capacity that's necessary, but it's this technique part that really has gotten me psyched about getting into this and dialing it in. The mobility it takes, and that's something I've recognized as I've aged. We were just talking about our 40s. That starts to slowly sneak away. Seems like in little increments, and then one day you're like, oh my God, I can't get my shoulder over my head anymore. So that's the other part I love. It really makes you focus on mobility, keeping a strong core, but being able to open shoulders and hips appropriately. So, yeah.
I started doing CrossFit about a year ago. Fell in love with the sport coming out of years of bodybuilding and other things before that.
Yeah.
I think what's most humbling about CrossFit for me was the Olympic lifting.
Yeah.
The Olympic lifting, and I'm unfortunately I haven't done CrossFit traditionally in the last 3 or so months, just because I came in too hot, and I don't actually believe that I injured myself in CrossFit, but going as hard as I was going, it definitely polarized some of the injuries that I've had in the past.
Yeah.
Brought them
100%.
right to the surface.
Yeah. It will point them out quickly.
Yeah, it pointed them out quickly. So I went from lower back sort of sciatic stuff into now a shoulder.
Yeah.
But I've actually been doing a little bit of like a hybrid, which I love. But I will say that the Olympic lifts are what excites me most about the sport. Yeah. Because it is so humbling. It is so hard. It is so technical.
So technical. Agreed. Yeah. And the thing about CrossFit, it's a great sport for multiple reasons. I think for aging actually appropriately, it seems like every time I'm advising a patient around their exercise, so often it falls into this kind of paradigm that we know is good for aging, where you want to have the capability to go good with your zone 2 and 3. That should always kind of be the base of that pyramid. And then that middle component of strength in that pyramid, and then the top tier being that VO2 max, going as hard as you can, being able to sustain that for a little bit. And I love that part about CrossFit. Interestingly, as we age, I feel like sometimes if you're going in with that mentality that you went in with, and that a lot of us built like you and I go in with, where, hey, if I'm going to do this, I'm going 100%, right? That you can be prone to injury. Mm-hmm. So you need to have good coaching around it, around technique. And that's the other thing I'm loving about this Ollie lifting. When I'm snatching even lighter weight for speed and reps in a CrossFit workout, I feel so much more comfortable now, so much more robust around, resilient to injury, just because I've got this baseline understanding of technique now that I feel like it keeps me safe.
It's so interesting that, I guess I can correlate it to, I remember when I first started Muay Thai, kickboxing. There was definitely a lot. There were obviously a lot of moments where you felt like you had a little breakthrough. But I think the one that I remember most, for whatever reason, is with the jump rope.
Yeah.
The jump rope is like, and in CrossFit, it kind of came a second wave of it with the double unders.
Yeah.
Getting the rhythm down with a jump rope is not easy, right?
No.
Like, it takes people a long time. You see people jump, skipping, even just single unders. In Muay Thai, it was all single unders with super heavy ropes, right?
Yeah.
But it's just a timing thing, and it's a rep thing, right? It's just like, how many reps are you willing to do?
Yeah.
The more reps you do, the faster and better you're going to be at it, right?
Yeah.
And I remember in Muay Thai, there was that, like, one day I was like, oh, wait a second. Oh, I got it.
There it goes.
I got it. There
Clicks.
It is.
Yeah.
And and there've been moments, not many, but there've been moments in CrossFit where the bar just came up.
Yeah.
I felt that sort of like
weightless for just a second. Yeah.
Weightless bar, right at my chin. I got underneath it. I didn't have any trouble getting my ass to grass to get under that bar. And I was like, whoa, that was the feeling.
It's a beautiful feeling. I know. You know when it's there. I know. It's like golf. You know, you hit 82 bad shots and have one that's beautiful, and you're going
brings
back.
it right back.
Yeah,
brings it right
exactly.
back. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about you so we can kind of get a little background, and then we're going to dive into some questions I got.
Okay, cool. So as you mentioned, I after med school, I completed an MD and got really interested in the public health realm for a little bit. I saw so many disparities in the healthcare system. That kind of, in retrospect now, I recognize that's led to what I'm doing now. But I came out all fired up about, changing the American healthcare system. So I went and I got a public health degree from UNC Chapel Hill. And immediately after that, I was doing some practicing, just private practice stuff. But my wife and I, who's a physician also, we saw this opportunity to kind of jump. We were living in a place we didn't want to live anymore. So that's when we moved overseas. And I looked for a job where I could really practice this public health degree. So was involved in actually in HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria work in Indonesia for a couple years. And during that time, did some travel to Africa, where we eventually ended up setting up a program to reduce maternal mortality. My wife was really the energy behind that, but it was great helping out with that. And we've had a relationship with that. It's called Mama Maisha. It's in Tanzania. We've continued to stay in touch with that, but aren't as hands-on about that anymore. So after that, moved back to the States, landed in Asheville, North Carolina, where I knew a lot of people and had done training. So took on a private practice role there, some with the residency, and then found Wild Health in 2018, 2019. I did the CrossFit offers an MD level 1 training course now, so just for doctors. So through that, I made these connections that eventually led down the pathway to precision medicine, which is what we practice at Wild Health now.
That's so cool. So CrossFit offers an L1 training for doctors only.
It does, and I think they've changed that in recent years. I think now it's called health professionals, like HP L1.
Okay.
So it's open to more people, but initially it started out as just physicians.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Wild Health. Give us a little synopsis.
Yeah. So Wild Health is super cool. As you mentioned, the thing that really attracted me to it, first the sports medicine background, the kind of performance aspect, because we do focus a lot on performance. And not just for our elite athletes, but for the weekend warrior and the daily guys like you and me. But the genomic component is what really fascinated me. So being able to look at someone's genes, these different little what we call SNPs or single nucleotide polymorphisms that make us all unique, determine everything from skin and hair color to how we metabolize fats. So being able to take that really targeted approach with a patient and treat them as an N of one, basically. Not apply these vast stores of literature that we have to treat the big populations, but be able to focus on that one person, that individual in that moment, based on their genes and some of the biomarkers you were referencing, and advise them around everything from nutrition, macro and micronutrients, exercise, sleep. We look at neurobehavioral genes, like we all should be meditating and using breathwork more, but specifically saying, hey, you actually are genetically built to not handle the allostatic or daily stress load as well as the rest of us. So can really do some poignant kind of interventions there to change.
You're
that.
also able to sort of dictate what kind of exercise.
Yeah, totally, and that's the part that really gets me. I get pretty psyched about that section. So we look at genetics around whether you're more of a strength or endurance balanced athlete, whether you're going to respond better to high or low intensity activity, and then probably most importantly, what your recovery time is. Kind of what we've referenced already. Too many of us have this mentality that more is better. So man, if I got to work out 6 days a week and some weeks 7 days a week, that's not true. I mean, what we know in exercise science now is that the gains really come in the recovery, right? We do the work.
Can you repeat that?
The gains come in the recovery. Yeah, exactly.
Wait, can you say that one more time?
Recovery is key. I don't know how much we can stress that, but I would say the majority of the time when I am advising someone around those genes, that's usually the message. Hey, you need to back off a little bit, treat yourself well. Use things like sauna and cold plunge and breathwork techniques, get good sleep, Dear God, it's crazy how much we neglect sleep in this country. But those are the key components of that.
Something that I was super grateful to learn from you guys. Well, one, I think you said to me something along the lines of, you have a very high threshold for pain. I think that's what you said.
Yeah.
And you were kind of built for CrossFit style sport. Mm-hmm. And you need to start eating sardines. And so I've joined the sardine gang.
Good.
And I got a bunch of people around me on the sardine gang.
Good. I thought this office smelled a little bit, Yeah.
It's very funny. So you told me that, and I was like buying I was like going around and trying to find like the best tasting sardines and like which ones work, which ones I like the best. I have not anymore, but for a while, my buddy Joe DeSena, who's the founder of Spartan Race, he and I had at least 3 days a week, a 5:20 a.m. daily call or 3 day a week call where we would just check in, shoot the shit. I would be in the sauna, he'd be like, doing something crazy, and we did that. And so I told him, I was like, hey man, I'm on this sardine kick. I had this meeting with the guys at Wild Health, and they told me that I need to pump my omega-3s, and so I'm getting some of these omegas from Thorne, but I'm also eating sardines. And he goes, how many sardines are you eating? And I was like, well, I'm definitely having a can a day. And he goes, I've got a very good friend who owns a sardine company. I was like, no, you don't. He's like, oh, yeah, I do. I was like, are you serious? He's like, yep. My buddy owns a sardine company I think in the Ukraine or around that area. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'm going to have him send you some sardines. And sure enough, like a month later, I got these massive boxes of sardines, like hundreds of cans of sardines.
Yeah.
And I'm still making my way through
I love
them.
it. I love it, man. Yeah. That's it. It's a good hookup.
So you're obviously a fit guy, and you work with a lot of people that are trying to be better on a daily basis, right? Mm-hmm. That is the goal. That is like you're so lucky to have put in the work to be able to advise people on being better human beings inside and out. Yeah. What does your morning routine look like?
It's varied, first of all. I want to start out saying that. I feel like sometimes, at least this guy can be a little bit hard on himself if I don't, not hitting everything exactly the same every morning. Varied because I have 2 kids. I have a wife that works. And so, life comes up sometimes. But on an ideal morning, it's coming downstairs and right off. I love to have that time in the morning. I'm an early riser. Keep that time. It's kind of sacred to me for myself.
What time?
5, sometimes 4:30, but usually, no later than 5:30. Kind of depends on if I'm coaching a CrossFit class that morning or what my day looks like when I know I'm going to need to exercise. But what I never miss these days is that first, I think I've heard you talk about this too, that first glass of water before I do anything. Usually using something like LMNT or something like that to hit that before I do anything while I'm turning on the coffee maker and walking outside. So I try to get outside, see the sky every morning, take a walk if I can, just a short walk around the block just to get things moving. Trying to avoid that first cup of caffeine until I've had, especially if I'm heading to the gym, a few calories. I feel like that's good for my HRV. Having coffee, it's hard for me to get to the gym without at least 1 cup, so I usually do that before I go to the gym. My genetics say I can do that, by the way, so I use it. I use it favorably. But yeah, and before I walk out the door on a perfect day, I'm doing at least 10 minutes of meditation. Yeah, okay. Yeah, meditation and activating breath work.
So you mentioned making sure you're getting a few calories in before you're having your cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. So I would imagine you're not an intermittent faster.
No.
Can you tell? I mean, so many people have been intermittent fasting, mm-hmm. or what are they calling it? Time restricted feeding.
Yeah.
Do you what is the actual science behind that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I talk about this a lot with folks. So,
because you said it was great for your HRV, and I think that's also important to correlate this fed or non-fed
or unfed state. Yeah. Exactly. That has a lot to do with it. So intermittent fasting or time-restricted feeding, TRF, we do love to use that in the appropriate situations. So if someone is right on that threshold of getting into metabolic disease, i.e. insulin, resistance, we see cholesterol numbers headed in the wrong way. If there's some body composition changes they want to make, it can be very effective. The way that we misuse it in this country is usually by eating too late in the day. So the majority of the literature, in fact, I think all the literature that I've read on this is with doing earlier time windows. So the most robust, the best literature out there that I've seen has been done on a time-restricted feeding window of 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Or you could, if that's just too early, going like 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. But the key seems to be cutting the meal off earlier in the day, so that we're getting our last calories in and having a good 2, 3, even 4 hours of fasted time before you lay down.
And why is that? Is that going to help you sleep better, which is ultimately going is that because the body is metabolizing and breaking down food, and that is ultimately not going to give you the best chance to get the best sleep?
That's exactly right. Yeah. We know that the best way to engage that parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest nervous system, is when you've given that food enough time to pass through the first part of the small intestine. We're in a lower inflammatory state. Anytime you have an insulin spike, insulin equals inflammation. So the lower inflammatory state you can go to bed in, the better.
I've just got a few more questions because I think it's really interesting. I've got you here. I'm going to ask away.
Yeah.
Why do some people handle and metabolize carbohydrates better than others? And on the other side of the coin, why do some people handle and metabolize fats better than others? Yeah,
that's exactly one of the things we start out looking at Wild Health. If you'll remember, it's very much a genetically determined thing. So we know that there are certain genes that really are effective at the mitochondrial level, the cellular level, at breaking down carbohydrates and using them efficiently as fuel. And some people don't do that well, ironically. I feel like in general, carbohydrates over the last decade, probably longer, have gotten a bad name. I feel like if we're talking about carbohydrates as simply plant-based foods, thinking about not only fruits and veggies, but nuts and seeds, whole and ancient grains, they generally are good for most of us. And specifically, when we're stacking them around times of activity, I kind of think of a 2-hour window pre and post workout or activity, very safe for most people to have. But the genetics let us guide people about the timing of carbohydrates. So if you are someone who doesn't do well with them, then going lower later in the day is a great idea, before you're going to lay down to rest. So that's one thing we can really target with the type of medicine we practice, is advising around ketogenic versus whole food plant-based versus a nice Mediterranean or paleo mix. Yeah.
I love trying new ways to eat. I don't call it diet because typically I have a pretty consistent lifestyle of I eat healthy.
Yeah.
That's my lifestyle.
Yeah.
I eat healthy 85% of the time, and I'll do a ketogenic protocol 6 weeks if I feel like doing it, just to maybe flush out the system. Or I'll try something that a friend says was fun,
Yeah.
But I always go back to this pretty consistent, steady, healthy. I know what I'm having for my first meal today, which is typically meal 1 from Creatures of Habit. I know what I'm having for my second meal today. It looks something like lean protein and veggies. It's typically what it is. I know what I'm having for my third meal today, which is typically lean proteins, potentially a little fattier, and a salad is typically what it is. And the veggies at lunch are typically in the starchier side of things.
Yeah.
I know what my snack is. My first snack is typically a meat stick of sorts, and my second snack is a ready-to-drink, clean protein shake, typically.
Where the sardines come in there?
Sardines are just midday.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Nice. Good.
Sardines are midday, and I'll typically have so I pack my lunch every day. I'll probably pound my sardines right after I eat my salad, my lunch salad.
Okay.
That's typically what my day looks like. And I think that it's always good to have a default like that. So it's it's a no-brainer, not non-thinker. But I've been thinking about trying to do this meat and fruit thing that I've been reading all about and hearing about, where a lot of people have said, the carbohydrates from fruit in place of carbohydrates that you would attempt, for me, I would get from either rice or oats or something, could be a really interesting experiment to try. Have you any experience, or have you heard anything about this?
I've had some patients who have tried this, and I think there's value in it based on genetics, based on gut microbiome too. So we pay a lot of attention to that. I haven't personally tried it myself, but if you've got a gut microbiome that definitely needs some work, and I kind of failed to mention that earlier, that can be a big player in what you're doing with your carbs and your fats as well. But I think that definitely when you're thinking about a high fruit intake like that, especially if we're focusing on the really prebiotic-rich foods, apple pectin is one of the main ones that are going to support a healthy gut microbiome. I think that could work really well. Yeah.
And obviously that's not. I wouldn't say that would be like a sustainable lifestyle, right? Just eating meat and fruit forever.
Yeah.
But if somebody wanted to try something like that,
yeah,
I wouldn't ever tell anybody to do the carnivore diet, because I think that's crazy.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Agreed.
I think
100%.
it's just a little much, right? Just eating fatty cuts of red meat, I think is a little nuts.
I agree.
But if you were to advise somebody to say, hey, you want a little gut reset, you want to try something, maybe you want to shed a few pounds, this could be something to give a go. Would you do like a 6 or 8 week kind of protocol with that?
Yeah, I think I think 6 weeks is generally long enough to see some physiologic change for sure. We know biomarkers will change in about that time as well, a lot of them. But I think that if you're thinking about, again, getting back to the gut health component, that tends to take a little bit longer. So if you're doing that specifically for that reason, because you've got some gut issues with regularity or just distension, you don't feel great when you eat certain things, sounds like a diet that would be really good for that. But that's generally going to take longer, the gut microbiome.
3 months.
3 months at least.
Gotcha.
We generally think about the gut microbiome in kind of quarterly changes, 3, 6, 9, see where you're going with that. Yeah.
Cool. We talked about sleep a bit, and I know how important sleep is. I mean, that's when all the work gets done, really. Right?
All the work.
Mentally and physically.
Yeah.
What does your wind-down routine, or do you have a wind-down routine look like?
Very much so. I would say that's actually more regimented than my morning routine tends to be sometimes. But so I've recognized this as a person who's living with someone who's on call a lot. I've done a lot of meal prep over the years, and I've come to this point in my life where I've had this profound realization that actually is a really good time for me. I love putting on some music in the kitchen, some jazz or something slower, and just starting to do food prep and trying to be really mindful about that. So that's kind of the beginning of what I think of, it being the end of my day. Trying to eat as a family is something that my wife and I have really stressed recently with our kids who are getting into their teens now. We've got a phone-free policy at dinner, and I think that's something that it's so easy to sneak into times, that really adds a lot of meaning and connection to our time with our kids. And then, after that, like my where the real treasure lies, where the good nuggets are, is sauna and cold plunge. So every night that I'm at my house, we built a sauna about a year and a half ago now. It's 15 to 30 minutes, whatever I'm feeling that night, of sauna, followed by cold plunge at least 2 minutes after that.
So you do sauna cold at night?
I do, yeah.
Can you talk to the distinction between sauna and cold at night as opposed to the morning?
Yeah, I think there's benefit for cold plunge either time. The cool thing about cold plunge, pardon the pun, is that it's it's definitely
the cool thing about cold plunge. Cold plunge or ice barrel, you could take that.
Yeah, exactly. Is that the benefit that I feel, because I do it in the morning occasionally, you get this bump in your neurotransmitter, specifically your norepinephrine, that's really an energizing, feel-good hormone that lasts for up to 6 hours after you've done just like 2 minutes of cold plunge. So it can be a great start to your day. I've definitely played around with that in my own life, and if I'm on target and feel like I have time, I'll do that. For me, though, it's more effective as a sleep modulator, because you do this sauna, your body temperature is already 102 degrees or something, and you're able to jump right in the cold plunge and usually stay in there a little bit longer. And you get this burst of activity or activation that you would expect, but about 30 minutes after that, you experience this profound parasympathetic system takeover. So I find that about 30 minutes after I've gotten out of the cold plunge, my body temperature's dropped, and that's necessary for good sleep. Our body temperature drops, 1 to 2 degrees for us to fall asleep. So it's kind of a hyper speed way to do that. And then I just get this profound relaxation that happens about 30 minutes after that. It's this big, jump in activation, and then it's just like, boom, just hit the bottom, ready to go, ready to get in bed.
I've got to try it. I mean, I have been such a consistent sauna cold plunge guy first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
I do it. I mean, I don't. Do you use an infrared or do you use a dry, like traditional
dry? Yeah,
traditional
barrel.
Dry.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a barrel sauna and an infrared. I use the infrared in the morning just because there's just a lot of study about infrared and Lyme disease.
Yeah.
And so I've been using the infrared for my Lyme, and I've seen, I can't correlate it all to the infrared, but I use it every day I'm home. I'm in that sauna in the morning, and I have staved off Lyme flare-ups for a long time.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
I don't know if it's from the. I do so much.
You do a lot of other.
I do a lot of other things,
sure.
but I think the culmination of them all. However, I have not done the sauna and the cold at night consistently ever.
Yeah.
And so when you get out of this is really, I know this is chewable, good, valuable content for the listeners, because everybody either listening does it, wants to do it, or is at least very interested in this stuff.
Yeah.
So in the morning after I plunge, I don't shower. I for a while, for like probably actually until after I train. So I let my body kind of come back to temperature.
Yeah.
And when I drop my kids off at school, or my wife does, and then I go train,
Yeah.
and then I shower.
Yeah.
So I know that one of the great assets to cold exposure is allowing your body to sort of like come back to temperature.
Exactly.
As opposed to getting right into like a hot sauna and finishing in the heat, or a hot shower.
Yeah.
How do you handle that at night?
Always finish on the cold.
And
Always.
then you wait like a certain amount of time and then get in the shower?
Or I don't shower.
Or you don't shower. There you go. Right.
Or the cold plunge is my shower.
Right.
Yeah, depending on the status of the water, actually. So and I love what you said there, because one of the real take home with cold plunge that people need to hear is that that's where you get the benefit. It's that period of letting your body warm itself back up to room temperature. That's where we get that brown fat activation, the good fat that we like to have that makes us, we maybe shiver a little bit. And then the other thing that we do is we build up our mitochondrial density through doing that. So mitochondria, as you probably know, are the powerhouses of the cells, and associated with not only improved athletic performance, but improved health span and lifespan, the more mitochondria you have per cell. So it's in that period where your body is warming itself back up that you induce what we call mitochondrial biogenesis. So you start driving up the creation of mitochondria at the cellular level.
I think it's important to also say that everybody correlates cold plunge to this like savage, badass, do hard things kind of vibe. And I think, yes, there's that for sure, right? Like it's not easy to sit in freezing cold water for 4 or 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
It's just not. Like you have to have the conviction to want to get through it, because that first 90 seconds for me,
It's pain.
It's pain.
Yeah.
It's pain. And now I've taken my hands out of the water, so I keep my hands out of the water because I also have
Raynaud's.
And so my hands will go blue.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm keeping my hands in the water, even though they turn blue. And then finally I was like, you know what? I'm not putting my hands on. I'm going to put my hands right out of the water, and it's been a totally different experience.
Yeah.
Because they would literally feel like they're going to like pop off my body.
Yeah. Like you could break them off when you get out. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
But the weird thing about it is that, and it always happens at my 15th breath. So I do 30 long, deep, slow breaths. My hands are in the water. At the 15th breath, I'm dealing with excruciating pain in my fingers and in my toes. And at the 15th breath, it just goes away.
Goes away, yeah.
And so that's got to be like some sort of, it reminds me of like lactic acid in my quads after like hardcore echo assault bike, or like, something like that, where the lactic acid is just like intense, where it's so like tough. And if you stop for more than 10 seconds, you got to stop for 10 minutes,
Yeah.
But so I don't do that anymore. But I think I think for me it is truly about creating adversity in life.
Yes.
Where adversity that we were created to be able to withstand doesn't necessarily exist anymore, right? Like humans were not created to take a shower in hot water every day, right? Like
exactly.
There was no hot water when we were created, right? It was like everything was cold. It was just all fucking cold.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I think that, you know, not like, you know, I'm not trying to be the liver king here, eating raw liver, but I do think that creating adversity intentionally so that you can essentially develop thicker skin for when things get hard. You know, I also think that there's a lot of conversation about like humans just getting soft.
We're so soft. Yeah. Have you read The Comfort Crisis?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I love that book.
Yeah. Great book. Great book.
Such a good book.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love you used the term that I was going to throw out there if you hadn't, but adversity. I'm going to steal it from David Sinclair, the guy who wrote Lifespan, the Harvard Genetics Lab professor, and he uses the term adversity mimetics, and that's what we're missing. So you need to have something in your life that is mimicking the adversity that our genes have evolved for 120,000 years to tolerate, and we're working against our genes basically with the standard American lifestyle every day. When I think about diet, I think about, we didn't have canned, processed, we didn't have calories all around us until like 100 years ago. It was after World War I when we started doing all this stuff so we could ship food to troops, that we all of a sudden started building up this caloric excess. It's good to fast every now and then. So we talked about intermittent fasting. That's not for everyone, but doing a 24-hour fast once a month, doing a couple days, a couple times a year or quarterly, that's great.
Is that highly recommended?
100%. Yeah, I try and fast once a month.
For 24 hours?
Yeah, did a 3-day fast. It's about a month ago now. Trying to incorporate those kind of adversity mimetics, a la sauna, cold plunge, going up to these thresholds of being uncomfortable, and then just kind of crossing right over and coming back. That's what our bodies want to do. That's what we've been genetically evolving to do for a long time.
What have you learned from seeing so many snapshots of people's genes? What are some of the big takeaways that you've seen that are consistent?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I almost think about it. I have enough patients now of different diverse ethnic backgrounds that I've noticed a couple things, and one is that I feel like the genes I see in people of Northern European descent, a lot of us typically have this combination of these two genes. One's called the IRS1, the other ApoA5. And they both have to do with actually fat ingestion as opposed to carbs, which seems a little bit off because they're both risk factors for developing insulin resistance. And I feel like that's a commonality that I see frequently with people with Northern European genetics. I see a lot of people that we've referenced this already, but that need a lot more recovery than they're getting. We have a lot of high performers that come in to just, optimize even more with us, and they're doing, who knows, I've got a couple guys that are, exercising 16 plus hours a week in different modalities. I'm like, man, this is like, you've got to back off. There's a lot of benefit, and it is just like you said, the work is done when we sleep, when we recover. But you actually, you can infer damage from that. You can definitely overactivate that stress response, that HPA axis, where eventually you just, after having high cortisol for so long, you kind of bottom out, you burn out. So that's a lot of what people miss, I think, when they're not paying attention to recovery, because that is a commonality. I see very few people who are in this fast recovery camp that says, yeah, you should be exercising 6 days a week, and then doing something on the 7th day that's kind of, light recovery. For the majority of us, 4 to 5 days a week of some really planned, fairly intense activity, whatever level we're at, with a couple of rest days is the
and so
right
when you
recipe.
say rest days, you mean literally, obviously you're going to go out for a walk, that's fine. But like nothing that's getting your heart rate north of 125 BPMs, basically.
Depending on age, yeah, we look at max heart rate based on age, but yeah, exactly, looking at staying under that 70% of your max heart rate on a recovery day for sure, yeah.
You know, I identify so much with that because I have this hunger to compete in everything I do. And it's not that I'm a competitive person, but I'm not a malicious competitive person. Really, the person that I tend to compete most against is myself.
Yeah.
So I'm not like looking to like outperform those people. Although when there's somebody much better than me, it's great for me as a competitor because I am chasing that person.
Yeah.
You know, that has been something that I found to be very, very important in my life, right? So always find, even hiring as the founder, CEO of a company, I'm always trying to hire the person that's smarter than me.
Yeah.
So that I can,
Love that.
you know, not only learn from, but also like there's an equal level of respect no matter what, right?
Yeah.
I'm always looking to chase. But what I've been dealing with recently is injury, man. Injury. And I was forced to really have to think about what I was doing, because in early June, in late May, I was in LA. It was like the day after I got there. My body was probably not in the greatest condition based on jet lag and travel and just like, you know, acclimating. And I went to the gym and I had like a 5-piece, you know, workout. And one of the pieces was 15 toe to bar. It was like 15, 20, 10 or something like that. It was 15 toe to bar, 20 box jump, burpee box jump overs, and 10 deadlifts. And and it was
blowing up your core.
It blew up my core, dude. It blew up my core, and and I blew up my lower back. And I was lifting too heavy, too fast, and I blew it up. And it was 15, 10, 5. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And my back went poop on those deads, and I was like, oh shit! Like I felt it go right. And so I just like, all right, man, that is just a sign. Let me just chill. Let me just chill. I took like 3 or 4 days off, flew back to New York, went to CrossFit in where I live now in upstate New York, and I said, I'm just gonna work on shoulder to overhead. That's what I'm going to work on. I'm not going to go in and do anything crazy. I'm just going to work on my shoulders to overhead. And sure enough, boom, tweaked my right trap. And I'm like, God is telling me something here.
Yeah.
Like God is telling me to chill.
Yeah.
But I still didn't listen.
Yeah.
I took a couple days off, and then I said, all right, for the next week, I'm just going to get on the Concept 2 bike and just bike for 45 minutes. And I found myself biking like, you know, too hard.
Yeah.
And I woke up 2 days after doing that, and I had sciatica that was so excruciating that just annihilated me. And I was out for 2 months. And it was obviously very, very painful and really unfortunate and not fun, but also like needed. I needed to go through it. I needed to feel it.
Yeah.
Because I needed to be smacked in the mouth and said, hey, dude, you may not think so.
Yeah.
And I can't even believe I'm saying this out loud, but you are not 21.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now I'm like a go wad nut, right? Like I'm on the app. I do the daily, I do the pre-wad, I do the post-wad, and I really
Are you loving that?
I love it.
Yeah. I need to activate mine. I've done that before, but I got a free year membership at the games, and I'm psyched about getting that going again.
I just, I think for everybody listening, and I'm sure it's music to your ears, you said it a couple of times on the podcast. We all think we need more. When in actuality, chances are, if I gave myself 4 days of really focused 80 to 100% at different times in the workout, 4 days a week, I'd probably be better off. than 5 or 6.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love, to bring it all the way back to what we opened with, the coaching is what has really done that for me. We are all our worst coach, right? And I have the same problem. I would not be able to take it easy on that Concept 2 bike or the rower. Like, okay, well, if this is all I'm doing, I got to go hard. It's so nice to have someone who you're checking in with regularly and who's telling you, today I want you to do these 3 movements, but I want you to do them at 70%. Like, work through this Metcon or this workout I'm giving you, and I want you to be able to take a nice breath between each exercise, slow transition time, focus on form, get to your next exercise, but don't go hard.
I want to finish with this, and I know it's hard, specifically because you guys focus on genes, and so you guys are not making generalizations. You're looking at humans for their actual genetic makeup.
Yeah.
However,
yes,
I'm gonna ask the question because I think if there were 3 to 5 things that the listeners of the Creatures of Habit podcast can start to do and or stop doing, that you have seen to be either a huge asset or an absolute liability. Give us something to walk away with here.
Okay, so 3 things that either don't do or make sure you're doing. Okay. I'm a little bit biased because I've really incorporated this in my own life, but the science is there. Breathwork. Breathwork is huge. Breathwork is my ninja move to get people to start meditating and working on mindfulness, because whether you realize it or not, I hear every day, I suck at meditation. No one sucks at we all suck at meditation, right? When we start, we have the monkey mind.
By the way, I've been meditating for years, and I still suck.
And you still suck at, right? I know, yeah, exactly. So, that's a commonality. Don't think that you're just that person who can't meditate. Working on focused breath work gets us in that same meditative state because you're just focusing on counting breaths. You don't have to do it for very long. Great study came out in January of this year in the journal Nature, really prestigious journal, showing that 5 minutes of breath work a day over 30 days, physiologically, people got better. Their HRV went up, cortisol levels fell, testosterone levels in males bumped up. So just 5 minutes for 30 days has that kind of profound effect.
Before you leave the breathwork thing, can you give us a couple of techniques that you have seen to work for you and also others?
Yeah, I'm personally a big fan of box breathing, and we all probably know what that is, the 4 hold, 4 exhale, 4 in the box. I extend the exhale to 6 and do the hold for 2.
So you do a 4-second inhale, 4-second hold, 6-second exhale, 4-second hold?
Hold for 2, and then get back into your 4. So you're still doing the same kind of cadence per minute. And if you've been doing it for a while, extend it to 5, 5, 7, 3 or 4. Just hold the breath a little bit shorter after the exhale. But the study I referenced was done on deep sigh breathing. You familiar with that?
Tell me about that.
So it looks like this. You do one big inhale through your nose, then a second, and then a long.
Oh yeah, I do that.
8-second exhale through the mouth.
Huberman
Huberman has really made this popular. Exactly. And that is probably arguably the most effective way to take a 5-minute break in the middle of the afternoon when there's all kinds of chaos going on and just reset your autonomic nervous system. So
before we go on to the other ones, I want to just make a mention that I think is super important. And if anybody's been following along on my content or on this podcast, I've talked about this a lot, and I think it's important to mention it again. As a person who works with a family, there's always a time where if you're a smart working person, and are not if you have not set any boundaries for yourself and you work 16 hours a day, I'm sorry. But if you're someone that has been able to figure out a way to set boundaries and make a family a priority in your life with business, if you don't separate the energy, the business work energy from family, it tends to just bleed right in.
Yeah.
Right? And that energy is very potent and definitely not energy that your kids have any interest in, or your wife or husband or whatever have any interest in.
Yeah.
And I got smacked in the face with that about a year ago and then it was my son who basically, I walked into the house, I was still working on my phone. And my son, I'd walked in, literally, it was like a Thursday or whatever. And I walk in, I don't say hi to anybody. I'm in this, like writing in the space. And my son is here, and I'm paying all my attention to the phone. He's standing right there, and he's like, Dad, Dad, Dad. And I look at him, and I'm like, buddy, like, do you not see what I'm doing? And it was like, oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how could I have just, like, my son, all he wants in life is my attention.
Yeah.
Like, that's all the kid wants. He doesn't care about anything that's happening here. He just wants my attention.
Yeah.
And it's so emotional for me to think about that. Like,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what went through his mind when I did that.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe I'm playing it up a little bit here, or overdoing it a little bit, but it impacted me so deeply to know that, like, I just hurt that boy's feelings because I'm too involved in the shit that doesn't actually matter in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I like caught myself. I leaned over and I said, buddy, I am so sorry. I love you, dude. What is it?
Yeah.
Phone away.
Yeah.
And so what I started doing from that moment on is, when I drive my truck home, I pull up into my driveway and I stop the car about halfway up. I turn it off and I do box breathing and the double inhale, long exhale. And I do it for about 5 minutes. And I close my eyes when I do it, and the car's off, there's no music, I'm like kind of listening to the nature. And when I open my eyes, if I don't feel baselined, I close them again. And I do the exact same thing. And it's typically 10 rounds of box breathing and 5 double inhale, long exhales, which take me about, something like 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And the energy that I walk in, it is a full-blown
it's profound
buffer.
Yeah.
It changes. I had a woman on the podcast recently. Her name is Dr. Sarah Bren. It was wonderful to have her on. She was a doctor that works with parents and that are struggling, helping parents be better parents.
I listened to that. Yeah. It was great.
So she talked about the nervous system. She talked about how our infants are the what is that part of the brain, the amygdala?
The amygdala.
Amygdala.
Yeah.
Is scanning at all times. It's scanning the human. It's scanning.
Yeah.
And it's looking for. It's tapping into the nervous system. It's tapping into not what you say. It's
all the nonverbals.
It's the nonverbals.
Yeah.
And what I learned about that experience when I started to put that breath work, buffering the transition from work energy to dad husband energy, that buffer, that 5 minutes of my life, which is nothing every day.
Yeah.
5 minutes changes my whole entire nervous system.
Yeah.
And it changes my mental capacity.
Yeah.
And somehow, some way, it does something.
Yeah. It's invaluable.
I think the breathwork thing, and I know that like what we're talking about is really baseline breathwork. I know that breathwork has like many layers.
Oh yeah, you can get holotropic. You can go
have you dove deep into that?
I have, yeah. It's a trippy experience.
I heard.
It's great.
I want so like if you had to give us if you could point out one technique of breathwork that's a little bit more involved. Is there one that you like?
Yeah, I mean, I think if someone's just interested in kind of holotropic and activating breath work, the basic Wim Hof stuff that he teaches with the 30, belly breaths forced in and out as fast as you can go. Exhale, hold as long as you can. Inhale, hold for 15 seconds, and start over. So 3 rounds of that. I think that's a really good starting place. For real holotropic sessions, you want to be going, we as Wild Health, when we get together at offsites, we always do this as a group. It's really a deeply moving spiritual experience. We're holding hands, we're sitting in a circle, there's always tears, there's always laughter. But we go for more like 20 to 30 minutes, and you kind of work through the different chakras of the body, starting at the head and moving down. We listen to a prompt that kind of tells us what to envision as you're going through it. But it's a profound experience, and talk about like not needing that cup of coffee after something like that. You're just on a different level. So yeah, that's.
Is there a place? Is there something to find like on YouTube where people can
Yeah, man, I've got a great link. I can share it with you after this. That our CEO, one of our company founders, shared with me, and I can't remember the lady's name right now, but she teaches this kind of breath work. She's an Indian lady that just has this beautiful voice and walks you through this session. But I can.
You should check out. I had a guest on the podcast. Her name is Biet Simkin, and she is a breathwork specialist. And she's been a meditation teacher, and she's had a crazy story, wild life, and she's developed a style of breathwork, and she shared it with me. And it's very simple. It's not super intense. It's not like heavy breathing. It's just this like simple style of breathwork. But it adds a little bit of physicality to it. So like you kind of do this thing with your arms, and then you kind of drop your head, and then you come back up your arms, and then you drop your head, and then you take a deep inhale in. Look up, and your neck has to be straight, and you kind of go up you kneel high, and you hold your breath there, and you push your stomach out like you're pregnant.
I love it. Yeah.
I did it for the first few times, and nothing happened, and I was like, this is bullshit. And I called her, and I was like, Viet, what's going on? Is this real? Like, because she was telling me that it's like a totally out of body experience. I was like, I didn't have any out of body experience. She was telling me like you got to get padding around, like you could faint, and she said, listen, you're probably doing it at the wrong time. Maybe there's some stress going on. Like why don't you try it towards the end of your day and give it another shot? And so I did. And I couldn't, saying it out loud, it just seems like bullshit when I'm going to say it on the podcast, but I'm telling you that I was like, felt like I was tripping on mushrooms, like a severe dose of mushrooms. Yeah. I can't, like, I did the whole thing. I got scared because I felt like I was going to a deep, crazy place. Yeah. I kind of fell forward. And then in my head, I was looking up, and I was underwater, and I was looking up at like the water rippling with the sun
from underneath.
Underneath.
Oh wow, that sounds amazing,
dude. It was wild, man.
Yeah.
It was wild. And then I kind of came out of it, and I immediately called her. I was like, "Holy smokes!" Like that was. She was like, "I know." And I was like, I thought I was kind of dying, but it was beautiful. Yeah. And she was like, how crazy is that? Yeah. You know, like you can get there.
Yeah. We do it with some of that movement as well in the group session where we're bringing our hands up together. We're holding hands. A lot. You may have experienced this, but a lot of people, you start losing feeling in your hands. Like a lot of times my hands are just, I can't feel them anymore. And it says you kind of increase the pace, because that's one of the keys with holotropic breath work that I've practiced is you start out with these forced inhales and exhales, but then you speed up as you come to the point where you're going to hold your breath for a little bit and then start the next round. But each of these rounds, rather than just 30 breaths, or 5, 6, 7 minutes, and it seems to be cumulative by the
5, 6, 7 minutes of that sort of like Wim Hof style.
That's right, and the pace is picking up, and then it's a hold, and you let everything go out, and you hold it for a while.
How long do you guys hold it for typically?
It's for in a group setting. You're not, everybody's got a different capacity.
Minute and a half, something like that.
Yeah, so around a minute or more, but it's just kind of that reset button, then you start again. And I find it's cumulative. The last time I was kind of in the same thing, I'm not feeling this today, and by round 3, I was like, maybe I'm feeling something. By round 6, I was a leopard. Like I was in the jungle. I was like, I was having that full on like, oh my God, what's happening? And I noticed there's tears coming down. I was like, why am I crying? It was all there. And it's you just were trying to describe it. That's kind of the definition of like a psychedelic or out of body experience, right? It's ineffable. We can't put words to it. So it's like that. Yeah, and I agree. It's an amazing modality to get you that same place.
In the beginning of the pandemic, my very good friend, John Stein, who's also been on the podcast, wonderful human, he and I, nobody knew. Everything was new, right? Like you're stuck inside. Yeah. You've never experienced life like this before. Everybody thinks it's doomsday. What are you going to do, right? What are you going to do with the fear? Yeah. Like that's the big question. Like what do we do with the fear? And so Jonathan and I decided that we were going to get into Wim Hof breath work. And so every morning at 9:30 we did Wim Hof, and we started with 3 rounds of 20 breaths, then we went to 3 rounds of 30 breaths, then we went to 4 rounds of 30 breaths. We were doing minute and a half hold, minute hold, minute and a half hold, 2 minute hold, 2 minute hold, we got up to 4 minute holds.
Wow.
And I got into this place where the way I was sort of managing the fear of like what it was feeling like to like hold my breath for that long, I would get into this place where I'm lying on the bed. And sometimes I'd have my eyes open, sometimes I'd have my eyes closed, but I would kind of fall into the bed. Like that's how I would get through that. Like, oh my gosh, it was so weird where I felt like my body was pulsating, like fully pulsating. It was like there was like a fucking techno rave going on inside my body. It was just like
in-body rave. Yeah.
And every time I get to that place where I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna let it go, I would just go and just sink like into the bed. It was so crazy. So yeah, I mean, you and I went off on a tangent with the breath work. I think it's so cool that there's so many ways to explore. But even that 5 minutes making an impact. Yeah. All right. What else?
Yeah. Well, and this one's a little bit, maybe, it's not generic. You're kind of asking for a generic, here's the things that can help. I would say we've kind of hit on it, but I can't remember the last patient that I didn't recommend omega-3s to. I feel like, the FDA has long stated that, 1.5 grams or 1,500 milligrams of omega-3s is, where we should live every day. That's not true for optimization. That's they make their recommendations based on a let's keep you alive, resource limited setting. A lot of the recent literature has pointed to north of 3,000 milligrams a day of EPA and DHA combined. They're really potent ones that we use as mammals. So sardines, great choice, 1.8 to 2 grams a day that you're going to get in that, or a salmon fillet or a couple pieces of smoked salmon. But I can kind of make that recommendation outside of any one specific genes. There's almost always a reason for them. Neuroprotection, better firing of those neuromuscular junctions, recovery. My elite CrossFitters and some of the NFL guys that we work with, they're taking like north of 6 or 8 grams a day. So they're just taking loads of fish oil and eating really high.
So 6 to 8 grams a day would work out to how many milligrams?
That's 6,800 milligrams a day, 8,000 milligrams a day. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're on the super EPA.
Yeah.
And like a can of sardines, or more than that.
So if you have 2 of those super EPAs, and we're just using that because obviously you take the same one, you have 2 of those capsules and a can of sardines, you're going to be over 3 grams or 3,000 milligrams. On days like right now when I'm traveling, it's my insurance policy. I take 2 in the morning, 2 at night, because as you know, it's just a really potent form, made in a non-oxidized state, so really well done. And
just for anybody listening, those super EPA omega-3s are from a company called Thorne.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that's a pretty safely universal piece of advice to give most people. And then something we see a ton of, I see very few people unless they're already supplementing with adequate vitamin D levels. So I have this kind of universal supplements thing I think of that I advise for just about everybody unless there's really a contraindication. So check with your healthcare provider before adding these. Have to give that little caveat. But, I think of creatine being one. I think of vitamin D being one. And I think of omega-3s being a third that are just about good for everybody. The creatine science, you're probably aware of this, but it's so interesting because, we've known for it's the most studied sports supplement of all time. So for hypertrophy, for strength gains, for basically return to activity. Half the guys in the Tour de France were using creatine this last year just because it's just so good to get back in the saddle the next day. So there's those benefits, but thinking about some of this new literature we're seeing around cognitive benefit, so decreasing the cognitive decline in patients with Alzheimer's, keeping you mentally sharp. It's a really good methylator, so it helps us to methylate better, which is very important for brain and liver and vascular function.
And creatine's for everyone. It's not just for bros.
That's right.
And dose typically is going to be 5 grams.
5 grams. My baseline advice is low and consistent. Don't even worry about the timing. Just get it in every day. A lot of science says that you can't absorb more than about 3 grams at a time. So if you're really getting granular with it, doing like 2.5 grams in the morning, 2.5 at night to get to that 5 gram total.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then is there ever a reason to take more than 5 grams?
Yeah, I mean, it's sport specific. Yeah, sure. If you're, again, thinking about that dosing and not being able to absorb a ton, doing, small, frequent, just 5 gram scoops throughout the day. If you're really working on muscle gain or hypertrophy, bodybuilding.
This is a shameless plug, but I really love this stuff. So there's a new creatine gummy company called Create. Have you heard of these guys?
No, no.
So they make these gummies that taste really good. It comes in a bag of 75, and each gummy has 1.5 grams of creatine. So I think for me, it's made my creatine consumption so easy, right? Because originally the formula had just 1 gram of creatine per gummy, and so I would just eat 5 gummies mid-workout because they also have some carbohydrates in there. So it's like a little bit of sugar, a little bit of carbohydrates. For me, it's perfect for mid-workout little pump of energy. But I love the fact that you just broke that down, that the body can't actually metabolize more than 3 grams at a time. So if you wanted to take 2 servings, you can break it down that way based on the amount of grams per gummy. I think that's a pretty cool thing that Create did. Creatine has never been like a fun thing to include in my life, right?
And it's kind of messy,
and you've got to have the, I always travel with a tub of creatine, right? It's like always travel with a tub of creatine with me because I take creatine every day. Now I got the gummies, which I think is fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. That does sound a lot better. Yeah.
And then, lastly, and to finish, 3 things that people should think about potentially refraining from.
This is low-hanging fruit, and it's everywhere out in the media, mainstream media. But I feel like we still ignore it. I mean, get off your screen. I think there is such a profound impact on sleep just by trying to get away from screens after like 3 p.m. even, just as early as you can in the day. If it's just impossible, and it is for a lot of us because we work in these little light boxes all day, making sure you've got a quality pair of blue blockers that you could put on at least at that time to start cutting down on activating blue light that we get.
That really does make an impact. You really believe that the screens are just...
I do, yeah, 100%. I'm traveling here in New York by myself. I found myself bored, Instagram death scrolling last night. It was like, oh God, all of a sudden my eyes were hurting. I tried to get tired, and it's like, shit, neck's hurting, eyes are hurting. Like, what am I doing? It's like 9 o'clock. So, I think really trying to back that up even more than we think we should. I've gone to, I finally got some prescription because I have a hard time with looking at the TV at night, and my wife and I do like to watch a series every now and then, but just trying to put them on even during something like that, a couple hours before bed for sure.
So TV is not nearly as bad with blue light blockers as the phone.
Totally.
The
proximity.
phone.
I mean, we got it right in our face. It's just,
and it's
intense.
just super stimulating.
Super stimulating. So it's like, those guys knew what they were doing.
God, I would do anything. I honestly, Doc, I would do anything to eradicate cell phones. I would do anything.
Yeah.
I really would, man.
Yeah.
It's such a hard thing to do away with, right? But I feel fortunate at this stage. Social media is such a big part of my life, and business. But I do not post on social media anymore. I've hired a team of people that I obviously strategize with, and I create the content for. But I do not ever post outside of Instagram stories every now and again. I don't post anymore because I just know the impact.
Yeah.
I write my calendar in a physical planner because I just know that anytime I go to pick up my phone to look at what's coming next on my calendar, I'm going to end up on email, text, Instagram, it's just going to, and it's so bad. Something's got to give. I went to an entrepreneurial roundtable on Tuesday night. One of my investors invited a bunch of his portfolio company founders to this dinner. And they sent out a survey pre-dinner to try to get some good topic conversation going. And they said, what's your, and there was a lot of tech entrepreneurs there. And one of the questions was, what is your prediction and or hope for technology in the next 12 to 18 months or something like that? And honestly, for me, my hope is that we find out some piece of literature, some piece of studied, actual studied content that proves that it's killing us.
Yeah.
That it's actually killing us.
I believe it's shortening our lives. I have no doubt. If you equate longevity with time spent in more of that rest and digest parasympathetic nervous system, you are never in that nervous system when you're on your device. And that is a big kind of theme behind, looking at health span and lifespan. They do not promote the parasympathetic nervous system. Yeah.
What else?
Another one, quick hitter, protein earlier in the day. Without a doubt.
Earlier.
Yeah.
So stay away from protein later in the day?
No, not necessarily that.
But make sure you're eating
exactly.
protein. Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Most of us do not front load our day with protein. And my goal for just about everyone I see, of course, it's based on body weight, trying to get a gram per pound of body weight per day. Try and get 50 grams before lunch. Most of us don't even get close to that if you really pay attention to it.
Well, anybody listening to this podcast tends to because they eat one, and they get at least 30 grams.
Your disciples may not need to hear that. That's right, but it's that's a huge component with basic metabolic health. Protein is for all intents and purposes, largely a metabolically neutral molecule, meaning it's not moving us towards insulin resistance, towards cholesterol problems by itself. Amino acids just don't do that. It tends to be what we have with the protein, the sugar content or the fat content that can affect us, and that's where we look at genes around that. But in general, eating more protein earlier in the day is going to lead to better satiation, better energy levels, less of that late night, crappy snacking we do. I think that's a really easy theme to go with. And then lastly, movement early in the day is key. I think if you get up and you're not focusing, I don't care if 4 o'clock is your workout at the gym. If you're CrossFit, for instance, you always hit the 4 o'clock class or whatever. Do that, but do something right out of the gate. You got to get up and start moving. Again, referencing our ancestors, they didn't get up and lay on the ground and, put their eye mask down again and be like, I'm going to sleep a little bit long. Get up and get active as soon as you get out of bed.
One thing that for anybody listening that can give you a little cue for that. For me, every morning, part of my morning routine is prayers, push-ups, and poses.
I love it.
So I do my prayers in the morning, and then I'm already down there on the floor. Like right after I hit my prayers, I do 50 push-ups, and then right after I hit 50 push-ups, I do my yoga poses.
I love it.
and that's that. Getting the blood flowing, boom, like right away is so crucial for me. I never miss it. I never ever miss it.
Yeah. I
Prayers,
think that's
push-ups,
key.
and poses.
I'm going to borrow that, man. That's a great idea. Yeah. Adjust my morning routine a little bit, for sure. Man.
Dude, this was so awesome.
I loved it.
So awesome.
I loved it.
I knew that we were going to have a good convo, and I feel like being able to give this kind of information from a tried and true doc, not only, but not a doctor that is seeing families in a community, right?
Mm-hmm,
a doctor that is literally on the front lines of dealing with elite athletes and looking at a number of things, not only blood work and biomarkers in the way of blood work, but really looking at like genetic makeup.
Yeah.
And like that's a step further, right? It's a different thing.
It's the blueprint. Yeah.
It's so awesome to be able to ask you as many questions that I wanted to, and I think I got to all of them. I had a list in my head. I was like, man, I got to make sure.
This was like our medical visit, like a second to follow up Yeah, exactly.
This was awesome. I really appreciate you coming out for it.
I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, it's been an honor.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all ages, I hope you got as much value as I did out of that podcast. This one was a very, very good one. You should definitely go check out Wild Health, without a doubt. If you want to take your health to the next level, go check out Wild Health. It is a different experience. I love a lot of the telehealth companies out there. I work with some. I love them. I love blood work. But really, really, the genetic work is a different thing. It is going to talk to you. Not a standard or not a standard of optimization. It's going to talk to you specifically based on what's going on from the genes that you were given by your parents. So very, very cool stuff. And please pass this to your friends, pass this podcast off to someone who you think would appreciate it. It would mean the world. That is the number one ask I have of you. Share the podcast with as many people as you possibly can. And the number two ask I have for you, you know I ask it every single week. Do me a favor. Take a couple of minutes out of your day. It would mean the world if you wrote a review and gave us a 5-star rating. It is actually how the podcast grows. It is actually how we bump up in the algorithm and get more people to see the content that I do just to create value in other people's lives. I really, really do this because I enjoy it. I love it. I love meeting people like Dr. Graham, but I also love bringing value into your life. So it would mean the world if you took the time to do that, because that is actually how this thing stays afloat. Aside from that, I love you and I appreciate you. And there's going to be many more podcasts to come. So until the next one, y'all, peace.